The Southern Pacific is turning into a battleground between two global superpowers, China and the US. These countries are competing for influence among the island nations that have largely been forgotten since the end of World War II. In 2022, the stakes were raised when the Solomon Islands signed a security agreement with Beijing. There are about 14 independent Pacific Island nations, with only one having a population of over 1 million people. Their combined GDP is approximately $36 billion, similar to that of the US state of Vermont. While these island countries describe their foreign policy as friend to all, enemy to none, they have long-standing ties with the US and its allies in Australia and New Zealand. China is making a bold move to raise its profile on the world stage by increasing its presence in the region. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's extended trip to the Pacific Islands in May 2022 included a ministerial meeting in Fiji. This shows just how committed China is to the region. As one of the largest national lenders to these small island states, China's trade with the area has grown from $153 million in 1992 to $5.3 billion in 2021, mostly in seafood, wood, and minerals. China's outreach to the Pacific is part of its strategy to build a network of developing countries to support its interests in global forums such as the United Nations, where the US usually relies on the support of its European, East Asian, and other allies. Additionally, China's efforts help isolate Taiwan, a democratically run island that Beijing considers a renegade province. In 2019, China scored a significant diplomatic victory when the Solomon Islands and Kiribati switched their diplomatic recognition from Taiwan to China. Western countries are feeling uneasy about China's growing interest in strategically located islands, particularly in the South Pacific. The fear is that these islands may become pawns in China's geopolitical rivalry with other powers. During World War II, the US fought a crucial battle against Japan in the Solomon Islands, which sits in a vital trade route between Australia, New Zealand, and the US. Guam and Hawaii, which are part of the US, could also be at risk if there is a hostile military presence in the region. The South Pacific Islands are part of Washington's island chain security concept, which aims to create a defensive line between US and Asia. However, Chinese officials have dismissed any concerns, insisting that the South Pacific Island countries are not anyone's backyard. China's efforts to build closer economic ties with the Solomon Islands have been ongoing for several years, but a leaked draft security agreement between China and the Solomon Islands caught Western powers off guard. Although the Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands, Manasseh Sogavare, has assured everyone that China will not be allowed to build a military base. But the draft agreement seems to suggest that the Chinese Navy will be granted a safe harbor. This has raised concerns about China's intentions in the region, and the US Coast Guard was unable to refuel in the Solomon Islands in August, shortly after the moratorium on foreign naval visits was announced. The Prime Minister has maintained that his country will not be coerced into taking sides, and that Western critics are treating Solomon Islanders like children with guns. The US and Australia have been stepping up their game to repair strained relationships with the South Pacific Islands as they grow increasingly concerned about China's influence in the region. The island nations were not pleased with former US President Donald Trump and former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison's dismissive stance on climate change. But things have started to look up since Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's government committed to reducing carbon emissions after taking office in May. US President Joe Biden hosted the first-ever White House summit with leaders from over a dozen island nations in September, resulting in an agreement that covers climate change, development, and security. It also includes plans to open some new US embassies, including one in the Solomons, which had been hesitant to sign until references to China were removed, which speaks to the island nations' concerns about China's influence in the region. At the annual Pacific Islands Forum in July 2022, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris appeared on video to announce plans to triple funding to the region to $60 million per year. Albanese also attended the event, but no Chinese leader addressed the forum. It seems that the U.S. and Australia are making a concerted effort to counter China's growing influence in the region and build stronger relationships with the island nations. Not to forget that China is still trying to make inroads, as their attempts to seal a similar deal in Fiji which fell apart due to concerns about Beijing's attempts to rush it through. As the situation continues to develop, it remains to be seen who will come out on top in the struggle for influence over the South Pacific Islands.